guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my booktube channel. So today I'm doing the Moonchild book tag, and I was tagged by Stories with Steph, and the original tag is by Crescent Moon Reads. So number 1 is Full Moon, a book with supernatural creatures. For this, I'm going with the Sentinel trilogy. So there's not a lot of supernatural creatures really in this first book. Mainly it gets into supernatural creatures later on in the trilogy. Like there's a giant goat, for example, and this fox, and they have this kind of aetherian energy inside of them. So they're kind of like these powerful creatures that could take different forms. Number 2 is Starry Night, a book with a beautiful starry cover. So for this, I'm going with Deliverer by Tricia Mingerink. So I read the first 3 books in this series. A friend is lending me the 4th, and I have yet to get into it, but as you can see, there are stars on the top half here. Number 3, Out of This World, your favorite sci-fi book. So about a month ago, I would have said it's Ender's Game just because I really love that. And generally, I classify myself more as a fantasy person than a sci-fi person. But then I read Illuminae, and this is probably just as good, if not better, than Ender's Game. Honestly, it took me a while to really get into it, but once I did, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And this isn't in narrative form, it's all like through instant messages, in emails, maps, things like that. So it's really interesting, but I didn't think I'd really be emotionally invested, or at least as much as I would if it were a narrative. But this book made me laugh and cry, and it was just incredibly interesting. So I actually really like this book. Number 4 is Creature of the Night, a thriller with a killer. For this, I'm going with The Fear. It's part of a series about zombies, so essentially it's a post-apocalyptic world, and there's this zombie-like disease, but it only affects people 16 and over. So essentially the only sane people running around are a bunch of gangs of kids. So I personally just like zombie books and post-apocalyptic things, so I'm really fond of this series. 5 is The Moon Controls the Tides, a book that deals with water. For this, I'm going with All the Light We Cannot See, because it's set near the ocean and there's this big wall that separates the city from the ocean, and ultimately the ocean is a big part of the setting for that French city where it takes place. And just so you guys know, All the Light We Cannot See is a historical fiction book taking place in World War II, I believe. And it's about this blind French girl and this German boy who works with radios for the Nazis. And at the center of all this conflict is this jewel that the Nazis are trying to get a hold of. So really interesting book, but above all, what I loved about it was just how eloquently it's written. Number 6 is Daughters of the Moon, a book that features some serious girl power and friendship. For this, I think I'll choose the Gender Game series. So it's a 7-book series that's on Kindle Unlimited, and essentially the basic premise is that there are these 2 different countries, one a matriarchy, one a patriarchy. They're both separated by this toxic river. In the matriarchy, of course, females are kind of dominant, and guys can only do manual labor. They don't have very many rights, and also if they're tested as violent, even if they're not really violent, then they get executed. In the patriarchy, on the other side of the river, women are ultimately the possessions of either their fathers or the men they decide to marry. I say they decide when actually the marriage isn't usually up to them. Usually it's between the future husband and the father. So there's this girl from the matriarchy who's sent to the patriarchy as a spy to steal back this scientific thing. It's like an experiment that the scientists back in the matriarchy need, except she's not really loyal to the matriarchy because they've been keeping her in prison for the past several years, partially for trying to save her brother who tested as violent on this test they have the guys take. Anyway, the relationship I'm referring to is between Violet, the main character, and a mentor she has in the story. So both of them are pretty tough gung-ho females, and they're both essential parts of the missions and stuff they go on, which happens later in the series. And really, more than friendship, it's almost kind of like a maternal relationship as far as from the mentor to the main character goes. But I really enjoyed this series. It was really well done. Sometimes I feel like Kindle Unlimited books don't usually have the same types of standards as traditionally published books do, but as far as Kindle Unlimited books go, this was really good. Number 7, Spaceship, your OTP. For this, I'd have to go with the Girl Who Dared to Think series. Honestly, for this, I just kind of have to go with whatever I'm reading at the time. But there are these 2 characters, Gray and then the main character, And they're just like so adorable together. I'm only on the first book of the series, and the author is actually the same author as the one who wrote the Gender Games. So I'm really enjoying the books she's written. 8, Waxes and Wanes, a book that played with your emotions. This one. Definitely this one. 9 is Music of the Night, a book that has to do with music. For this, I'm going with The Evaporation of Sophie Snow. So Sophie Snow, she's kind of this hacker in this future post-apocalyptic world. And in this world, there's a really big event. It's like these, half virtual, half Hunger Games. So all the players are in an arena, and they each have a team of hackers that they're listening to on their headset who can kind of manipulate the arena in various ways. So Sophie Snow is one of the best hackers ever, and she's on the same team as her younger brother Shiloh Snow, but then something happens where he gets kidnapped, and they suspect it might be by this mysterious alien race. Anyway, in this book, Sophie's really obsessed with music. She makes a lot of music analogies, so I'm going with that. 10, After Hours, a book with the word night in the title. I considered doing a Torch Against the Night, but I feel like a lot of people might do that for this tag. So instead, I'm going with Bewitching the Night. So it does have the word night in it, N-I-G-H-T. It just has a K at the beginning too. So this is the second book in a series. The first one I've talked about previously, and it's called She Owns the Night. So both of these were really, really sweet books. They're time travel, medieval romances. So both girls in the book start out in modern day. Something happens where they get transported back in time. In this particular book, she comes back and she has her hair dyed a bright artificial red, so they think she's a witch and they're about to burn her at the stake. And then this guy comes in and saves her. So very, very basic premise. It's been a long time since I read it, but this is a really sweet series. 11 is Crescent Moon, a book with a goddess. For this, I'm going with Betrothed to Jack Frost. This kind of deals a lot with mythology and gods and goddesses. So it starts out with this girl who lives kind of in a modern, normal day world, and she realizes that Jack Frost is trying to kill her. So it gets a little complicated from there because obviously the title is Betrothed to Jack Frost. So later they do have a betrothal. Well, there you have the Moonchild book tag. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for tagging me, and I'm going to tag the Sarah Cubit Diaries. I'll also put the original book tag down below so you guys can check that out if you want to. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below just like what your answers would be to this and any book tag ideas that you have. And I'll see you next time. Bye!